A man watches as a couple sits talking in their car in Blue Ridge Springs Park outside of Vallejo, California. He pulls his car up alongside, then drives away. About 10 minutes later, he returns, parking behind the young couple. Approaching the driver's side window, he pulls out a large flashlight. Thinking the man with the flashlight was a police officer, the young man rolled down the window. The mysterious figure shined the light in the couple's eyes, then began shooting them with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. After firing 5 times, he went back to his car, then returned and shot each person twice more. The Zodiac Killer had claimed 2 more victims. From the mid-1960s to the early 1970s, California's San Francisco Bay Area was plagued by the fear of the Zodiac Killer and fascinated by the mystery of who he was. He attacked 3 young couples in remote areas, a gravel parking lot on Lake Herman Road, a parking area in Blue Rock Springs Park, and the shoreline of Lake Berryessa. He also killed a cab driver in Presidio Heights. Like many other serial killers, the Zodiac Killer wanted public credit for the attacks and murders. His method of accomplishing this fame was to send letters to police departments, newspapers, and even individual people claiming credit. He proved that he was responsible by including details that only the killer would have known because the police hadn't released that information to the public. The Zodiac Killer further added to his mystique by sending coded messages and letters to the newspapers. Zodiac's confirmed victims: David and Betty. The Zodiac Killer's first confirmed victims were David Faraday, age 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, age 16. The 2 teens were on their first date. They had attended a Christmas concert at their local high school, stopped for a bite to eat, visited a friend, then drove out to a well-known lover's lane on Lake Herman Road. When the young couple were found dead, police determined that the murderer had pulled up behind the couple's car and forced them to get out. David was shot once in the head, point blank, as he got out of the car. Betty was shot 5 times in the back as she ran away from the killer. David and Betty were killed on December 20th, 1968. The Zodiac Killer did not claim these victims until he sent a letter several months later. However, when he did so, he included details only the killer would know. Darlene and Mike. Darlene Farron, age 22, and Mike Mageau, age 19, were the second couple confirmed to be Zodiac victims. This couple was attacked in their car at Blue Ridge Springs State Park around midnight on July 4th, 1969. The killer shot 5 times into the vehicle. Some of the bullets went through Mike and hit Darlene. The killer returned to his car, then came back and shot each of them twice more. All told, Darlene was shot 5 times and Mike 4 times. Mike survived the attack and shared important details with the police. Mike Mageau reported that the assailant was about 5'8" to 5'9" tall. He was in his late 20s to early 30s and had short brown hair, a round face, and a stocky build. Approximately an hour after the attack at 12:40 a.m., a man called the Vallejo Police Department, taking credit for the attack on Mike and Darlene, and also taking credit for the attack on David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. In addition to the police call, the Zodiac Killer began a letter-writing campaign taunting law enforcement and identifying his victims. Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell. As Cecilia, age 22, and Brian, age 20, sat on a blanket in a remote area on the shore of Lake Berryessa, a man approached the couple, wearing an executor's hood, clip-on sunglasses, and a symbol on his chest of a circle with a cross in it, like crosshairs for a target. He told the couple that he had escaped from prison and needed to steal their money and car to get to Mexico. Brian offered the man money and his car keys, but the mysterious stranger didn't take them. Instead, he tied them up with some clothesline that he had brought and stabbed them with a 10 to 12-inch knife with a wooden handle. Then, the killer just slowly walked away. Nearby fishermen heard the victim's screams and called in the attack. Due to the remoteness of the location, it took the ambulance an hour to arrive. Cecilia succumbed to her injuries, having been stabbed 10 times. Brian was stabbed 6 times in his back, but managed to survive. The killer claimed this attack by calling the Napa Police Department from a nearby phone booth. He also wrote a message on Brian Hartnell's car door. The message began with the circle cross symbol he was using as his personal symbol. It also included the dates of the first 2 attacks and the current attack, reading September 27, 69, 6:30 by knife. The final confirmed victim is cab driver Paul Stein. On October 11, 1969, Paul Stein picked up a passenger and drove to the corner of Washington and Cherry in Presidio Heights. Upon arriving at that location, the passenger shot Paul once in the head, killing him. He then stole the driver's wallet and car keys and ripped off a piece of his shirt. 3 teenagers witnessed this attack and called the police immediately. They described the gunman as a white male, 25 to 30 years of age, 5 foot 8 inches or 5 foot 9 inches tall. He had a stocky build and short brown hair, but unfortunately, the police dispatcher mistakenly entered the description as a black male. When the correction was made, 2 officers realized they had been in the area and had seen a man fitting that description. Again, to taunt law enforcement and to prove that he was the killer, Zodiac sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle with details of the crime only the killer would know. He also included part of Paul Stein's shirt that he had torn off. Based on police and FBI evidence, there were 7 confirmed victims of the Zodiac Killer, 2 of whom survived. However, in some correspondence, the Zodiac Killer claimed as many as 37 murders. This number is unconfirmed by any law enforcement agency. The murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966, 2 years before the first couple was murdered on Lake Herman Road, may be one of Zodiac's killings. Sherry was an 18-year-old student at Riverside City College. Between 9:23 p.m. on October 30th and 12:23 p.m. on October 31st, Sherry was beaten, stabbed, and her throat was cut with a short knife. The killer left her body in an alleyway. She was not immediately considered a Zodiac victim, and some law enforcement agencies still do not categorize her as one. Riverside and San Francisco detectives did agree in 1969 that she had been killed by the Zodiac, and he eventually took credit for the murder in letters sent to the LA Times, the Riverside Press Enterprise, and the Riverside PD. Despite these public statements, Sherry Bates has not been officially added to the Zodiac Killer's victim tally. One of the most enduring mysteries about the Zodiac Killer centers around the more than 20 letters he sent to newspapers, police departments, and individuals. His letters taunted police and revealed details about the crime that only the assailant could know. Several of these letters contain ciphers created by Zodiac. The Zodiac Killer sent his first 3 letters to the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald on July 31, 1969. The 3 letters were almost identical in content, and each contained 1/3 of a 408-character cipher that would supposedly reveal the Zodiac's identity when solved. The killer demanded that the letters be printed on the front page of each paper, or else he would start killing more people. Only the Chronicle published their letter on page 4. Eventually, all the parts were published. Once the crypto cipher was made public, it was solved in 20 hours by a couple, Donald and Betty Hardin. Betty discovered 2 cribs, partial solutions that allow cryptogram to be solved more easily. She determined that the letter began with I and that the word kill appeared throughout the letter. The killer sent 3 more cryptograms between 1969 and 1970. The second cryptogram contained 340 characters and stumped everyone for 51 years. In December of 2020, 3 amateur cryptographers, a software developer, an applied mathematician, and a computer operator created a program to crack the code. The third code was only 13 characters. It claimed to contain the name of the Zodiac Killer. However, the code is so short, it can be solved with multiple answers. The final cipher was 32 characters. It was part of a letter that included a map of the San Francisco Bay Area and claimed to identify the location of a bomb, but no bomb was ever found. Despite the letters, time, evidence, and attention to the case, the identity of the Zodiac Killer has never been solved. There are multiple suspects, each with a different potential for being the killer. Richard Gaikowski was considered to be a suspect because he worked at newspapers when Zodiac sent the letters. He physically resembles the composite sketch of the killer, and even more convincingly, one of the ciphers reveals his name. Rick Marshall was also a person of interest because he had similar physical characteristics and made suspicious comments about the killings on his ham radio. Lawrence Kane, also known as Lawrence Klein, fit the killer's description. He was briefly considered a suspect because he reportedly stalked one of the victims before her death. 2 other suspects were much more convincing. Arthur Lee Allen is a serious suspect. He lived near the location of all the killings. A friend of his, Don Chaney, explained that Allen was writing a book, the details of which aligned with the Zodiac killings. The main character killed couples, taunted police, sent letters, and signed it with the circle cross symbol, attached a flashlight to a gun so he could hunt at night, and called himself Zodiac. Chaney also revealed that Allen was inspired by the short story The Most Dangerous Game, which an expert hunter is tired of hunting animals and moves on to hunting people because they are more of a challenge. In 1969, Allen received a Zodiac watch for Christmas. The Zodiac Killer began using the circle cross symbol after Allen received the watch. The logo of the Zodiac Company is a circle cross. Furthermore, the letters that discuss Sherry Bates contains clues that point to Allen. These were signed with an odd symbol that could be a sloppy Z or a 32. Allen was 32 years of age and lived at 32 Fresno Street. It was also a Zodiac cipher with 32 symbols. Fascination with the identity of the Zodiac Killer has not faded over the last 50 years. Speculation continues, with multiple suspects being investigated and discarded by law enforcement and amateur sleuths alike. In 2023, a group called Case Breakers took a new run at the identity of the Zodiac Killer. Case Breakers is a group of passionate people with skills from over 40 professions, including lawyers, law enforcement, military, forensic specialists, academics, and researchers. After receiving new information from a whistleblower who knew the Zodiac Killer, the Case Breakers collected new evidence and reviewed old evidence. Their careful review revealed a new suspect, Gary Francis Post. Post, a former member of the U.S. Air Force, has a partial DNA match to evidence from the Zodiac case. He also clearly resembles the composite sketches and has a scar in the same place described by the surviving victims, and his name is revealed in one of the ciphers. Gary Post died in 2018. Whether he was the Zodiac Killer or not remains unclear. 50 years later, we are still fascinated with the mystery of who the Zodiac Killer was and why he committed these horrible crimes. Perhaps it is the mythological character of the killer. Zodiac created a new character, one who wanted to be seen but not known, who wrote in ciphers, identified himself with a symbol, and killed with no apparent motive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below.